Okay, so welcome back to Tanya Tuesday, and we should be good. I would say we should be good to do this again next week, though next week is a Jewish holiday. So if I don't get to it, you'll understand why, but I believe I should still be able to do that and then go to our program afterwards. It's the holiday of Lag BaOmer, and in fact, I shouldn't skip it because Lag BaOmer, which is next Tuesday, if there's any holiday to study the Tanya, it would be Lag BaOmer, because Lag BaOmer celebrates the great sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the one that wrote down the Zohar, the classic Kabbalah text. Now, we didn't necessarily have the Zohar for many years, but the fact that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a Kabbalist and it was passed down throughout the generations was known, even without the specific text. And so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is, so to speak, if you want to call the father of mysticism, the father of Kabbalah. Um, And that's why we celebrate with a barbecue. We celebrate with fire. The Zohar writes when he died, when he passed away, a great fire surrounded him. And he instructed that on the day that he passed away should not be a day of sadness, but a day of celebration. And that is why on the day of Lag BaOmer, of any days, is a day we should be studying Jewish mysticism, which of course we do every single week in the study of the Tanya. So Bezrat Hashem, next Tuesday we will indeed be studying the Tanya. Today's class is of a very, very important topic. We started it last week, and this week gets really to the practical side of it. So, in other words, last week described the necessity for Das. It said that what is Das? Das is knowledge. What does knowledge mean? Knowledge means you can have an idea, you can even understand the idea, but understanding alone does not make it that you will act upon it. We all have what we know called runaway feelings, right? In other words, we all know we have times where we're feeling one way, even though we know in our mind that it's the other way. So, what is the antidote to that problem? And the answer is Das. Das is the antidote to that problem. The more you can connect with your Das, the more you can uh, be successful in directing your emotions. I'm reading a book now about a guy who went through a very difficult period in his life, and he describes a lot of times different situations that would come up that would challenge his faith. And he would describe how the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, would make him all nervous. But then he would remind himself of his studies and deeply think about it, and he would calm down. And it can literally work. Your actual you can literally calm down when you employ Das. Just to tell you a story, famous story. There was a chassid called a follower of the Alter Rebbe, who's the author of the Tanya. He was a follower of Rabbi Shneur Zalman. So this chassid, his name was Rabbi Moshe Meislish. Rabbi Moshe Meislish was a very, very brilliant man, and he also knew a lot of languages. Now, during the war between Napoleon and Russia, the Alter Rebbe, the author of Tanya, was on the side of Russia. Not that Russia was big tzaddikim, were very righteous, but Napoleon was worse. Now, in the world today, people think of Napoleon as a great guy, but Napoleon had a lot of strange ideas, very anti-religious as well. It's a more lengthy story for another time. But more importantly, the Alter Rebbe felt that at that time, if freedom would come to the Jewish people, there would be no longer so many Jews would leave Judaism. And so, despite the hardships of Russia and Tsarist Russia, it still kept the Jews together and kept their identity. And so, the Alter Rebbe felt that at that time in history, being under the Tsar is better. And the truth is, we see that that's true. Whenever Jews have been given freedom, uh, I mean, we know what happened to the American Jew. We know what happened to the Jews in Germany. It is common that when we don't have external pressures, we assimilate too much. Now, I'm not saying I would like to have the external pressures right now, but you can even see it now, with the anti-Semitism that's going on, how many more Jews are reconnecting to their faith and their traditions. That's just always how it is. Unfortunately, we should be we should ourselves inspire ourselves, but that's how it goes. Be that as it may, the Alter Rebbe was on the side of the Tsar, and so he sent his chassid, his follower, Rabbi Moshe Meislish, to become a spy. He sent him to infiltrate the French army, and he went there as officially a translator, and he would pass on secrets back on to Russia. And by the way, for this job that the Alter Rebbe did, the Schneerson family became what's called the honored citizens, honorable citizens in Russia. They got a special title, honorable citizens, for the work they did for Russia during this war. Anyway, so Moshe Meislish was one day sitting in the war room tent, and he was, as usual, listening into plans. And um, what Napoleon rushes in, and he rushes into the tent, and looks at he says, "Someone here is a spy." And then he looks for someone he doesn't recognize. He looks at Moshe Meislich. He says, "You're the spy." And he runs over to him and he puts his hand on his heart, and he feels his heart, and he feels that his heart wasn't beating any faster. Okay, he was accused of being a spy. He was indeed a spy, but his heart wasn't beating any faster, and Napoleon backed off. Now, this is before the days that automatically, if you're a Jew, you automatically get accused of stuff. But also, I think back in the day, I don't know if they knew he was Jewish. Back in the day, lots of people had beards, so I don't think it was weird. So the point is that typically, if you know you're doing something wrong and someone accuses you, right away your heart rate's going to go up. That's the whole job of graphologists, not graphologists, polygraphs, right? Polygraphs. They detect lies by the changes in your temperature and your heart rate. And so Napoleon obviously knew this as well. And so when he knew there's a spy, he was trying to figure out who the spy is. So his tactic was he would run in and say, "You're a spy," and see if the person's heart rate would go up. Now, I would venture to say is that even if you're innocent, your heart rate might go up under such a scenario because you know that if he decides you're a spy, you're finished. So the later after the war, the other Hasidim asked for Moshe Meislich. They said, "How did you manage to keep your heart rate the same?" And his answer was exactly what we're learning today. He said, "What do you mean? I'm a Chassid. I'm a follower of the Alter Rebbe. This is what I've spent my entire life doing to make sure that the mind rules over the heart. Moach shalat al that the mind rules over the heart, which is something we read about in the beginning. What does it mean? The mind rules over the heart is that the mind can direct the heart to the emotions that you want to have. Okay? Doesn't mean shutting down emotions, but it means using your mind and redirecting. So, for example, let's say you're going through some difficult financial thing. It's causing you lots of stress. Your heart rate's going up. You're getting sick. If you employ Das, in other words, you take your faith and you employ Das so that you feel it in your heart, then you will no longer feel nervous. In other words, it's possible you have faith, and even though you believe in God and know it's for the best, you will feel nervous because right now you don't have money to pay your bills. But if you employ Das, that's the bridge that creates this connection between what's up here and what's down here. And so Rav Moshe Meislich was a master. That's what made him a great chassid. He mastered the art of Das, and that's going to be our discussion today, is how do we master Das? So with that, let's take a look inside to learn the key to Das and how we can too take what we know and bring it into how we feel, which will ultimately lead into how we act. He says like this. Merely learning from the sages of the generation will not be enough. You will have to make a sustained effort in your meditative work if you want to acquire real Das. Oh, because last week we spoke about how we each have a little bit of Moses in us, and we can all study from the Moses of each generation, and they can teach us. And by that, we can connect to God. So here he's telling you, but don't just rely on the little Moses inside of you. Don't just rely on the teachings they give you. They direct you, but you have to do the work yourself. It's like the old saying, I used to tell from Yeshiva, you could bring the horse to the water, but you can't make the horse drink, right? So the sages give us the teachings, but then you got to sit down and study it. So he says like this, the principal quality of Das isn't mere factual knowledge, as the term Das superficially implies. Das is often translated simply as knowledge, right? That's why there really is no good translation for the word Das. That's why I keep using the word Das, because there is no English word that truly describes Das. The closest thing we have is knowledge, but it's much more than not. the reason why we say knowledge is because there's understanding. So what's the difference between knowledge and understanding? So now I'm actually curious. What does Google say? What is the difference? Don't mind my spelling between knowledge. I'm a terrible typer and
I would say
understanding.
a deeper
Huh?
syn I would say probably like a deeper understanding, a deeper synthesis and integration of information.
Well, let's see what should we go with AI? You see, the problem is pulling from I saw it's pulling from Reddit, which is really weird. So the core difference between knowledge and understanding is depth. Knowledge is the collection of facts and information, while understanding is the ability to grasp the meaning behind those facts and apply them in context. That's
Oh,
funny
well, there we
because
go.
one second, our translation is the other way around. In other words, by us we say there's wisdom, it's an idea, then understanding is collecting the facts and information, even understanding it deeply, and then there's knowledge, which is Das, which is not really a translation. In other words, English separates knowledge just means your knowledge base, your knowledge of the facts, and understanding means the depth of your understanding. And by us,
Yeah.
both of those categories go in Bina. Yes, Nina.
That's it. I was saying, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So by us, both of those categories go in the word Bina, which we colloquially call understanding. So that's the problem we have here. There really is no English word for das. Okay. Maybe synthesis might be the closest word. Synthesis between your knowledge and your emotions. I'm not sure, but it's the best word I could think of. So putting aside the usual way knowledge, right, which is a knowledge base and understanding is used, in Judaism, Binah includes both of those. Okay, so Judaism has three stages of your mind. There's Chokhmah, which is when you brainstorm, it's like the light bulb that goes off, you have an idea. Bina is putting together what you know together with your ideas, taking the concept, truly understanding it. Then Das is taking that and taking what you know and pulling it to how you feel. I don't know if I don't know if there's a word in English. English has what you know and has what you feel. I don't think they have a word to describe the connector device, so to speak. So what is the connector device? And the answer is, as we'll see, the connector device is not just knowing it, but in other words, you can fully understand something, but it's more than knowing it. It's attaching yourself to that knowledge. It's, in Hebrew, as we'll get to in a moment, I'll give you the preface before I read it inside. Das in Hebrew is also the same word for intimacy. The Torah tells us, "Va'adam yada et Chava," and man knew Eve, right? And they had kids. So what does that have to do with the word das? Why are you using an intellectual word? The Torah a lot of times describes things with euphemism, but what is it about das that can describe a union in a marriage? The answer is because das is about strongly connecting with the other person, which is intimacy, and that might be the best word is knowledge intimacy. I see what you wrote there. I think it's more than that. That's the result. Uh, Heart-based understanding, mind-based understanding are two different things. We're talking about what merges the two is, let's just call intimate knowledge. Maybe that's the word we need to go with. Intimate knowledge. Das is intimate knowledge. What does intimate mean? Intimacy is a oneness. Um, a lot of times we use the word intimate knowledge in English. We use it to mean, well, you have knowledge about something secret, right? So maybe we'll say knowledge intimacy is a better way of saying it, right? Knowledge intimacy might be the best word here. So that's really the trick. The trick is not just to know the facts and not just to understand that you have the ability to understand the facts, but right now you have to be thinking deeply about it. So let me give an example. Let's say you went to a class on faith and you truly understood faith very deeply. Okay? And you walked away from that class feeling really good about faith, and you understand faith, and you understand how God is in every hidden thing that happens in your life, and you understand how, despite the darkness you might see in the world, God is really there. And if negativity happens in your life, God is writing the scripts and he's just hidden, and you understand the whole concept deeply, and you've analyzed it from all angles, and you might even feel faith at that moment. But 5 days later, um, when something happens in your life, you may fall apart, right? And what you'd have to do at that time is not just remind yourself of what you already know. You have to think deeply about it again to the point where it has that effect on your emotions. So it's about deeply connecting with what you already know. And that's well, I'll call knowledge intimacy, Das. Let's take a look inside. She says, right? In other words, if you just told yourself, what do you mean? You went to that class. You should believe. You know everything's from God. You say, yeah, but I don't feel it. Yeah, oh, I don't feel it right now. It's not so that's what we're talking about. So he continues. Rather, the main point is to feel the truth of these teachings by personally connecting with the ideas. Personally, that's what he's adding. Personally connected with ideas. You're feeling for something. I just wanted to mention, Nina, what you described is there is another word for it in Hebrew that we use. It's called midas shabamechin or mechin shabamidas, but that's for another time. But body based or heart based understanding is another thing in Hebrew, but it's not das. But it is also something else described in Hebrew that doesn't really have a good word, but now you gave it a word. Anyways, rather the main point is to feel the truth of these teachings by personally connecting with ideas. Your feeling for something depends on the depth with which your mind recognizes and connects with it. It's not just enough to recognize. The key to a successful Das meditation doesn't depend on which particular thoughts you have about God. What matters is the intensity of these thoughts. Okay, so that by the way, that tells us you can have someone who understands faith better than someone else, but yet when push comes to shove, will demonstrate less faith, right? People ask this question all the time. How is it possible you have religious Jews who are seemingly doing certain things that don't seem to fit with their faith? Or you have people who truly act religious and they get so nervous at certain things. How is that possible? The answer is yes, they're religious and they act religiously and they study all the things and they know all the truth, but they are lacking in their das, and therefore it's going to affect them. Now we'll also give a little more explanation later because like everything else in life, there's nature and nurture. In other words, we can't just blame it. Oh, well, look, this less religious. So, there's also nature. Some people have by nature an easier time for the Das to connect what they know to how they feel. But we'll get to that soon. So that's why we should not be judgmental of others and to say, well, they didn't try. It's possible even this religious person that you're looking at that's falling apart did try. Just God gave them a much harder job at it. But let's continue. The key to Das is through pondering deeply with your Das on God's greatness. Okay? And fixating your thoughts on God with an intensity of mind and determination of heart until a firm and strong attachment is achieved between your thoughts and God. Okay? So that's the key to Das. I'll read that again. Pondering deeply on God's greatness, fixating your thoughts on God with an intensity of the mind and determination of the heart until a firm and strong attachment is achieved. Now, these seem to be redundancies in the Hebrew. I did see a Tanya that gave an explanation of all these different terms because it does sound interesting, but there is a meaning to all these different terms, and I'm trying to look for it. I had it here. Um, no. So maybe he puts it in here. Das is achieved through an intense fixation, attachment of the mind and the thoughts to God to the point where you're drawn to him in his worship. In fact, this is suggested by the biblical term of the word das, which can sometimes refer to desire or will. Okay, he's bringing different proof. I do have another Tanya here. May just give us a little explanation on those. Let me just pull it out here. Uh, Here it is. And that reminds me my black book of Tanya preparation. I'm up to the last volume and I haven't bought the next one. So if anybody wants to buy me the next volume, it's all yours. But anyways, he says in here, what is all the what is all this languages that we're talking about? So he says, I remember seeing it before. Okay. So the point is that in order to truly connect with something, you have to understand it to where it almost becomes a physical reality by you. That's really what you're trying to accomplish. That's why knowledge alone is not enough because we're talking about something spiritual and you have to connect with it until it's almost like you're seeing it. That's really the idea, to take what you know intellectually and bring it almost to the point that, and they also add in here as well. It has to be something you care about. That's another important thing. In other words, not just you have to deeply put your mind to it, but you have to make sure you care about it. And that explains, now that this gets back to here, I was looking for this one. This is what I was looking for. He says, and fixate your thoughts on God with intensity of mind and determination of the heart. That's the important thing. In other words, you have to want to care about it. You have to want to care that it should, uh, that's the important point. Your heart has to care about it. Determination of the heart. So you have to say, this is something I want. And caring is the key word over here. So you have to care about it. Um, they say, um, this goes back to the explanation we gave last week. We said the famous story. We said the story of there was one time a simple farmer that got a letter. He didn't know how to read the letter, so to, he brought the letter to um, he brought the letter to the local rabbi, and the rabbi read him the letter because the farmer was illiterate. And in the letter, it says how the farmer's father died, and the farmer faints. And the question everyone asks is, why is the farmer fainting? The rabbi, who's actually reading the words, understands the word better than the farmer does. So why is the farmer fainting? And the answer is who cares more, right? So the rabbi may have more knowledge of the details of the death of the farmer's father. But in the heart, who cares more is the farmer. And so this is another explanation why people sometimes wonder, they spend so much time they spend so much time on studying religious things, and it doesn't affect them. And it has to be something that you care about. It has to be something you care about. What is an example of something you care about? I'll give another example. You have a business, okay? If there's a business, everyone knows generally, right? One of the greatest things people try with in a business is to get employees that care, right? It's one of the problems to be able to find an employee that cares as much as the what do you call it? To be able to find an employee that cares as much as the owner is almost impossible. And that's why owners invest so much time and effort into whatever they do because they care, right? So caring plays a large role in a lot of things, and the same thing will apply in taking what you know to what you understand. Now you might say, well, if I haven't done Daas, why would I care? Caring is a decision. Caring, I believe, is more of a decision. It's not so much an understanding. Caring is a decision. I could be wrong there, but I think to a certain extent, you have to decide that you care. Obviously, what you study can affect what you care, but I think you can, yeah. It's a good question that I'm thinking as I think about it now. But that's the idea. It has to bother you. It has to be, I'll give more examples. People sometimes hire lawyers or hire people to help them, tax consultants or whatever. And a lot of times, if it's not their own money, it's not their own problems, they're not going to invest themselves like they would for somebody they care about, right? In other words, you can always find excuses why, you put in your best effort, but when you care, it's a whole different story. It's like, let's say I hire someone to be the purchaser for Chabad. I need to get the person to the point where they care for every dollar that's spent as much as I do, right? In other words, how much they have to care for it, like they were shopping for their own home, right? When people shop for their own home, they're always looking for the best deal. Sometimes when people take other people's money, it's very different. So again, caring plays a large role. in allowing what you know to be able to be felt, because you have to put in a lot of effort in order to feel it. So you have to care enough to be able to put in all that effort. All right, so then he says like this. Then he continues. Okay, but how do you calibrate Das? How do you know when you've achieved it? So he says, Das will connect you with an idea, just like you're connected with a physical object that you see with your physical eyes, and which you're thinking about deeply. That's the idea. You have to be able to feel it almost physically. If you meditate effectively, Das has the potential to make the spiritual ideas real to you as if you had seen them with your physical eyes. It won't be that you've heard about God or that someone told you he exists. Through Das, you come to appreciate God as a living reality. And we know that the term Das suggests intimate connection, as in Adam knew Eve. So, in addition to knowledge and desire, in addition to knowledge and desire, Das also implies intimate connection. And this is acquired in three phases. That's why I called it knowledge intimacy, right? So there's three phases. Hiskashrus, deeply, personally connecting to an idea so you feel its relevance to your life. Hakara, deeply recognizing the real impact of the idea on your life. What's the difference between one and two? If anybody has any thoughts, I'll let you open up in a second. Hargasha, the sift from an intellectual recognition of an idea to an actual feeling of it. So these are the three stages of Das. Any thoughts?
What was your question again? I'm sorry.
What are the difference between the three phases? Particularly between one and two.
I can't find one and two. I'm sorry.
It's on the page over here.
I know it's
Here.
can't see. I can't see it that well. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I see. Well, here.
Where is it? Is it
Here.
even?
It's over here.
Oh, okay.
All in here.
Oh,
Anybody has any
you're
thoughts?
getting
Yes,
Yeah, I
answers.
got it.
Tanya?
Okay.
Yes.
It looks like Akara is more of like an example of something happening to you when you see it in real life versus recognizing the idea of it.
So you're saying one can be recognizing how it could be relevant in life, but not necessarily your life?
Oh no, they're both in my life, but one is like, I don't know, like if I got into a car accident, I would be devastated. And then getting to the car accident, like it happened. So I physically feel that impact. So like it's
I,
happening. The example is happening with Hakara.
Mm-hmm.
I I think it's levels. It has to do with
Or
levels of it.
levels.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and feeling that it's relevant to your life is different than it's having an impact on your life. I
Okay.
mean, I
Explain.
mean, the price of oil in Afghanistan doesn't have any impact on my life,
Okay.
but the price of oil in Florida has impact on my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then thinking of taking that to the next level is how do I feel about that, not only for my life, but to the people in Afghanistan? That's how I think of this is how do I connect to it for everyone, not just me? How do I feel about it for the world rather than just me?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other thoughts? I'm taking all thoughts here. It's a Das. Das is a very fascinating topic.
Does it have to do with like a God consciousness around these ideas and a less like not a God consciousness or God consciousness? Like bringing that in?
Um, Again, the idea here is not just to know that God is there, but recognize. Well, yeah. I
So a
guess
deeper
I
love
guess
of
the difference between
God.
one and two is one is an idea, and two, yeah, yes. Again, it's how it's written here, but the general concept here is important for everybody. So the point is that in our lives, we need to not only know concepts, like you said, you know the gas is high, or we have the example of the accident, but you need to be able to apply it to yourself. I think the idea of applying it globally was an idea that Alter Rebbe brought earlier in Tanya, is not to be not to be selfish. Think about Mashiach, think about everything else that it can do when if God is good for you, then God is definitely good for the rest of the world. Um, but yeah, and we have to take the shift at some point to go from the mind to the heart. All right, so the point is we've been discussing knowledge intimacy. Okay, knowledge intimacy. Now he's going to discuss, so he described what is knowledge intimacy. Knowledge intimacy is where I can think so deeply about something that I can almost touch it and feel it. Not only can I almost touch it and feel it, but I feel its personal relevance in my life. So if it's faith, I feel God everywhere and I see God everywhere, but not only do I feel and see God everywhere, but I feel his relevance in my personal, what's happening to me personally. And that automatically Daas will affect my how I feel about things, right? So that's the Daas. So how easy is it to do this? All right, he described what you have to do. You basically have to take a concept after you've understood it. Okay, so the first step is understanding, which is not even Daas. After you've understood it, now connect deeply with it. Care about the idea to the point where you almost like feel it like a physical sensation in your life, and you feel its personal relevance in your life that will then affect how you feel about things. So he says, but how hard or easy is this? So he says, and the potential to acquire this attribute of Das through meditative work, to connect your Das with God, is within the ability of every soul in the house of Israel. So if you are wondering, can you do this? His answer is yes. How so? By virtue of the energy which is drawn from the soul of Moses, our teacher, blessed in memory. Remember, we started off this chapter last time, just 2 weeks ago. We asked the question, how could the Talmud say that fearing God is easy because it's easy for Moses? But we're not Moses. And the answer was, we have a piece of Moses in us. And so because this is what he's getting to, because we have a piece of Moses in us, therefore we all can reach this level of Das. Being connected to Moses' soul doesn't mean that you will have Das of God automatically or effortlessly. It just means that if you put your mind to it and meditate with focus, you have the potential to succeed, right? How many things in life are we promised we will succeed? In the physical world, not necessarily. There's no promise that if you work hard, you'll make a lot of money. Maybe you'll cover, maybe you will, maybe you won't. It's up to God, right? But in spiritual things, we're being told a promise. If you work hard, you will succeed. In fact, there's a famous mission that says, if someone tells you, I tried hard and I succeeded, you believe him. If he says, I didn't try hard and I succeeded, or if he said, I tried hard and I didn't succeed, don't believe him. And that actually was referring to not physical things, because in physical things, you could not try hard and still be successful. We know people like that. And you could also try hard and not be successful. There's no promises. But in spirituality, there's a promise. You work hard, you will succeed. Now, obviously, depending how you define success. But over here, that's what he's saying. Success means Das. If you work hard enough, you will achieve Das. Knowledge intimacy. Only despite this inherent potential of your soul connection with Moses' soul, since your soul is placed in your body, an enormously great and intense effort is required, doubled and redoubled to tap into that potential. So he's telling you like this. You do have the potential. Every single Jew, if they work hard enough, can connect what they know to their heart. That's a great promise. That if you work hard enough on your faith, you can feel it in your life and you could be the calmest person around. But he's telling you, you should know there is an impediment. You can work around him, yeah, but that's what you have to work really hard on. And he says it's not easy. He says an enormously great and intense effort, doubled and redoubled. So now in the explanation he gives, what is it? Why the four ways of describing it? Enormously great effort indicates large quantity of time needs to be dedicated to this meditative work. Intense effort suggests the meditation must be of high quality. Doubled is that it involves both the body and the soul. And redoubled, since in both areas, two types of effort are required, as the Tanya will now explain. So he's going to explain. So what is the deep effort that's required? And I'll just explain it outside first. So again, we're saying the power of Das, which is the power to connect what we know to how we feel, is promised to us. Okay? by virtue of our soul, which is connected to Moses. So what's stopping us from getting there? Number one is, and I'm going to switch the order he's going to explain it in. Number one is even though it's promised, it still takes work. Okay? The soul requires work. Okay? Das is not, when we say something's promised to you, it's promised if you work hard. So, yes, deep in your soul, you have the power for Das, but you have to work, you have to study, you have to think, you have to learn. But then there's a second problem. We have the body. This is what he's going to explain next. He's going to say, if you are too physically focused, then the work you're going to do with your soul is not going to work. If you're a glutton all day and you're and as he's going to explain, possibly even sins, right? Sins as well. Sins, not possibly, but sins, sins as well. Sins that we have done can also block the light. So our body can be an impediment for us to reaching our soul. In other words, our soul, we know if we put in effort, we'll reach this knowledge intimacy. So some people want to know, but Rabbi, I sat by your class, I read about faith, and I don't feel it. The answer is, but maybe your body's getting in the way. Maybe you want to feel faith, but you're too focused on pizza, and you have some sins you need to do teshuvah for, and you need to be able to reach, you haven't even been able to reach to your soul. That's the problem. So let's read this. He says, firstly, there is an effort with your body in two ways: to crush the body by reducing your enjoyment to pleasures of this world, and to subdue it with humbling thoughts so the body won't eclipse the soul's light. In other words, there's choices in life. You can't be super focused on your body and expect you to easily reach your soul. Doesn't work that way. As explained above, citing the Zohar, the need for crushing the body, that if a body won't give out light of the soul, crush it and the soul's light will come out. So this was chapter 29 where we explained somebody who was meditating and couldn't feel anything. We said, well, maybe your body's in the way and you need to crush your body. We don't mean physically crushing it, but it means, maybe you need to do an ego breaking trip. Maybe you need to stop focusing so much on all the pleasures of life, whatever it is. The work of both crushing and subduing the body is carried out through thoughts of repentance from the depths of the heart, as it was explained before. Just to, there's a famous Hayom Yom. Hayom Yom. It says like this. So Hasidim are famous. Where is it? There's a famous Hayom Yom. It says, Hasidim used to say, what where is it? What I think it said. I think they said what you need, what you want, you don't need, and even what you need, you don't necessarily have to have. It's an interesting point. In other words, we have the point is just the simple desires. You don't have to have just because you like it doesn't mean you should take it. It's what we call taivas, pleasures, physical pleasures in the world. Siddim were famous at not giving in to their physical pleasures. They wanted their sole desire, and no pun intended, but their sole desire was to be able to connect to God. And therefore, pursuit of physicality was incompatible with that. And therefore, they used to say, the physical needs that I want, I don't need. And even the things that, or maybe it was talking about forbidden things. What's forbidden is forbidden. And even what's allowed, you don't need to have. I think that was the saying. But that's the point. The point is that even things that you're allowed to have, Torah allows lots of things, and you can go into a store and buy so many OU kosher things, but you don't need to eat it all. You don't need to buy everything. You don't need to indulge. But it's not just about, we could focus on food, but there's other areas. It's saying what we want to say, watching what we want to watch. All those areas of life, the more careful you are in just focusing on your needs and not your desires, will open you up to more spirituality. That's I don't want to say my bad news for today, but that's the news. It may not be a surprise to you, but that's the reality. In order to be spiritual, to be more spiritual, I would say, we need to focus less on the body, to because otherwise the body lifts itself up in a very great level of importance and will be able to hide on the light of your soul. Now he's going to explain later why, nevertheless, you could find some people who don't seem to be so who are very gluttonous and nevertheless can seem to be spiritual, and I'll explain that. All right, so the first effort that's required in order to feel this das, in order to feel this knowledge intimacy, is getting the body out of the way, and not God forbid ignoring the body, but just meaning don't indulge. Then he continues, and the secondly, there is an effort within the willpower of the soul to train your will to follow God, so that worship won't be a burden for you. I'm going to skip bother to burden. And practically speaking, this has two elements. You should put a lot of effort into deep mindful meditation of God's greatness, and this meditation should be long, uninterrupted periods. So what he's saying is, even once the body issue is out of the way, you need to make sure that the soul puts in the hard effort. Because even though we said that we have Das based on, um, even though we have Das, I was looking for something that was written before. Even though we have Das naturally in our souls, it still requires effort. And that's why I say nature and nurture. Okay? It requires effort to um it requires effort to decide to sit down and focus on the subject at hand. Okay? Exactly how long should the meditation be? So here's the question. So now you all understand. In order to get knowledge intimacy, in order to get Das, in order to be able to feel what you know in Judaism, you need to be able to think very, very long and care deeply about what you want, not focus on your body, focus on your spirit, and then you'll be able to feel Das. So here's the question. How long is it going to take you to be able to feel Das? Anybody has a response? Anybody knows how long will it take you to feel what you know? How much time do you have to invest in it?
It could be instant.
Okay. Or you said could.
Well, it's our soul is, like I like what you said that this is about every moment. Remember you said that the Tanya is about like something changing every moment, like God, like I forget the exact particulars, but it was very it's very moving that it's about recreating the world or yourself every moment. Okay.
Yes,
So
yes. God recreates the world every single one. But my question is, how long do you need to spend in order to feel what you know?
I say all day long. If you want the truth, all day long.
Uh, okay. But what's the minimum?
Each person has to define that for themselves.
Ah, very good. This is what he says. No fixed time can be given because the period of time necessary for this isn't the same for everybody. Because on the one hand, there's a soul which is rarefied by nature. Rarefied meaning purified. And when it meditates on the greatness of God, reverence and trepidation of God come upon it immediately. So, like Nina said, there's some people who could meditate for a moment and boom, they feel it. As written in the Code of Jewish Law, Orach Chaim chapter 1, that when a person will meditate on the fact that the great King of Kings, the Blessed Holy One, whose glory fills the earth, stands before him and is watching his actions, reverence will come upon him immediately. So that is a possibility. But there is a soul which by nature is feeble. I don't like that word. This doesn't sound nice. Well, the Hebrew word really just says low. And this goes back to our explanation in chapter 2 to really understand what does it mean a lowly soul. We explained how the longer a soul stays in the gestational period in heaven, the more of a separate identity it gets from God in an external way, okay? And so the more gestation your soul had, the lower the soul it is, and the harder it is for you to connect to spirituality. Coming from a source carved from the lowest levels of the 10 spherot of the worlds of Asiyah. That means you were gestationed all the way until the end. Such a soul won't be able to harbor thoughts of godliness without difficulty and persistence, especially if this feeble soul has been further impeded through becoming spiritually contaminated by the sins of his youth. Since sins make it harder to connect with God, as the verse states, your soul sins have separated you from God. As is stated by Rabbi Yehuda Chassid in the Sefer Chassidim, that you can't learn to connect your heart constantly to God unless you abandon sin, because sin separates you from God and causes you to forget your reverence. So, all right, so you say, oh my gosh, so what if I am the low soul? So the Tanya still says, we still have a promise. The Tanya encourages us. Okay, watch the recording. This is important stuff here. But nevertheless, even a feeble soul can sustain focused thoughts on God with difficulty and through persistence, through a determined effort to focus the mind intently with profound concentration, thinking deeply about the greatness of God for a prolonged period, and then this will definitely result in him acquiring at least a lower reverence mentioned above. So, in other words, don't look at your neighbor and say, "Oh my gosh, that guy, he's not so spiritual. Sorry, that person, he doesn't keep too much Torah mitzvos, and he doesn't have to work so hard, and he feels God. And how come I don't? How come their faith is so strong?" This might be the root of your soul. And so for you to get to the same place where he is requires much more effort. But we know the steps that are required to get to feel this knowledge intimacy. The steps are the same for everybody. How long those steps take is different. So step number one is to stop focusing on your body. Step number two, if you have sins, repent for your sins. And step number three is to focus your mind with care and concern and deep thought on God, whichever topic of God you're looking at. And then, depending on the factor of your soul, you will at some point, you might have to work really hard, you might not have to work really hard. At some point, you will feel a deep connection with God. And as the sages of blessed memory said, of the fruitlessness of effort. If a person says, "I've put in a lot of effort and I haven't succeeded," I don't believe him. But if he says, "I put in a lot of effort and I have succeeded," believe him. The Tanya's assurance that your persistent meditations will definitely result in a feeling of reverence takes for granted that you have first repented for your sins. For as cited above from Sefer Chassidim, the presence of unrepented sins may act as an obstacle to the meditative process. So it is possible, if you find that you are meditating long and hard and still you don't feel anything, then you might have to say, maybe there are some sins that I need to work through, I need to repent for first. But if there's no sins in the way and you're not indulging in your body, it's a promise. The Tanya says, take this to the bank. Meditate deeply with care and concern about God, and you will feel his relevance in your life. An inspiration for sustained meditative effort can be found in the verse. If you seek it like silver and search for it like buried treasure, then you will understand the reverence of God. Let's say you come to a mine and you know that it's there, it's underground. And I don't know if you ever took any tours in mines. To get to the gold, it's hard. It used to be a very dangerous job to get to that gold. But if you know it's there, you're going to go for it because you know that gold is there, that silver is there. If you work hard enough, you'll become a billionaire, millionaire, whatever it is. And so the Tanya says the same thing. There's a treasure inside of you. That's Daas. Daas is the treasure inside of you. You have the capacity to be able to feel God's eminence in your life. All that's required of you is care and concerned, deep meditative thought. Meaning that just like a person searching for a buried treasure hidden in the depths of the earth will make a huge effort digging for it since he knows that it's definitely there, in the same way you must make a huge effort to reveal the fear of heaven, which is treasured and hidden well away in the depths of understanding of the heart. Okay, so I thought I was going to get further. Of every person in Israel. And I'm going to skip over here. This understanding heart is an innate quality and level which transcends times, which means that you can definitely access it at any time. There's no specified time to access it. Your heart will inevitably feel a variety of different emotions at different times, but the understanding of your heart refers not to the actual feelings, but to the heart's innate capacity for emotional intelligence, a power which is not limited to a particular circumstance. Your capacity to revere God is not dependent on any temporal external factors, rather it is a treasure which you can unearth at any time. In other words, we said Das is the bridge that connects the mind to the heart. But remember, Das is still not actual feelings. Das means taking what you know so your heart feels it. But how strongly your heart feels it at any given time is now dependent on your heart's emotions, okay? So in other words, if you've thought about a deep concept of God, of faith, that should make you feel love towards God, the extent to which you love will actually depend on every moment. So in other words, he's promising you will feel love, but the fluctuation of love does fluctuate. You will feel love. How strong that love is, that can depend at any moment. And then he continues, and this treasure is the inherent dormant reference to above, which we said every single Jew has that reverence. only in order for the dormant feelings to motivate action at the minimal level of reverence necessary for sin, that you may turn away from evil in action, speech, and thought. In other words, we all have this dormant love, but you need to work on it, like we just explained. You need to bring out manifestly those latent, intangible feelings from the depths of the understanding of your heart. Okay. You can watch the ending. I'm just finishing up. It's really just finishing up this concept. And the concept here is, again, that we have deep inside of us this Daas that will allow us to feel reverence and love to God at any time. We just need to put in the effort. So let me just finish reading here and make you need to bring out manifestly those latent, intangible feelings from the depths of your heart, of your understanding heart, which transcends times, and make them conscious, if not as palpable feelings in the heart, then at least as tangible thoughts in your brain. And then you need to ponder these ideas deeply in conscious thought for a substantial period of time until its potential produces actual results, namely to turn away from evil and do good in thought, speech, and action. In other words, if it didn't work, you have to spend more time on it. At this very basic level, you're motivated not out of profound reverence of and a feeling for God, but merely because of God who watches and sees, hears, and is attentive to understanding. In other words, he's saying there's meditation will bring you to love, there's meditation will bring you to fear, and then there's meditation of simply knowing that God exists. That's what he's saying. This is what it says in Pirkei Avot. If you know there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears, you won't sin. Right? In other words, there's all different meditations you can do. So he's saying most basic reverence of God you can ever use is just knowing that God sees. Right? As in the teaching of our sages, consider three things, and you will not come to sin. Know what is above you, a seeing eye, a hearing ear, and all that your deeds are recorded in a book. But the point, that's just he's just saying within meditation, there's all different levels. And that's what I keep saying. The most basic point of meditation is to feel that God is real. The moment you feel God is real, you won't sin. If you truly felt it at that moment, that God is like right there next to you, how could you do something that goes against him, right? If you truly, fully felt it, there are many things we don't do in front of other people. And that's because, again, it's natural. Um, so if you truly felt God was right there with you, there's certain things we wouldn't do. But each and every single one of us in our own lives does things, even though we know it's wrong, and we know God sees it, but it's up here. It's up here. We know it. Anyways, but on the positive side is if you want to feel deep connection and love and longing towards God, meditate deeply about it, work on your knowledge, intimacy, and the Tanya promises, sins aside, that you will indeed feel God in your life. That's the spiel for today. I think it's an incredible gift that we're given, that we have this buried treasure inside of us. Like you said, if people knew there's gold underneath, they're going to dig. We should know we have this inside of us. Okay, I'll open up for questions and comments, or just
Yeah,
saying
I'm
goodbye.